So we got Joshua Buatsi and Callum Smith fighting each other on this big Riyadh season show in February. Presumably they're both being paid handsomely. Now these two have been linked to Anthony Yarde over the years, but rather than fighting him, they end up fighting each other for a load of money. The assumption of most people, including myself, was that the big money fight would be Buatsi versus Yarde, but that fight has failed to materialize. Now I saw Tunde Ajayi, Yarde's trainer and manager, on TalkSport a couple weeks back, and it seems like he's got a regular gig on there now. And he was very bullish in conversation with Adam Smith, insisting that his man Yarde has always wanted the Buatsi fight and has been available for the Buatsi fight without any promotional or contractual restrictions for something like the past year or so. And Tunde strongly insinuated that it's Joshua Buatsi who's never really fancied the fight. And if he had, then the fight would have happened by now. Well, here's why that's not convincing. I remember when Joshua Buatsi was ringside for one of Anthony Yarde's last couple of fights. It was either Nikolic or Silva. And they interviewed the pair of them after the fight, face to face. And it was Buatsi who seemed far more keen on it happening next. And it was Anthony Yarde who was being non-committal, talking about, well, I've got a bunch of different options and this, that, and the other. So personally, I don't buy what Tunde Ajayi is selling. In any event, there's also this Frank Warren issue that Anthony Yarde has been dealing with over the past year or so. Yarde insists he's a free agent. Frank Warren was insisting that that's not the case, at least for a while. Lately, he's gone a bit silent on it. He's nowhere near as bullish as he was a few months ago. The word on the grapevine was that Frank Warren only had matching rights left on Anthony Yarde's contract. The question is, did those matching rights expire with Yarde's last fight against Ralph Vilkans? Because that was obviously with Boxer. But potentially the bigger issue here for Anthony Yarde is that he may have been frozen out of lucrative fights at 175 pounds because of him cutting ties with Frank Warren. Now, I know Anthony Yarde and Tunde have both said that they're open to working with Frank Warren again in future, but I don't know whether Frank Warren will be open to working with them again in future. That remains to be seen. And Frank Warren can be a very spiteful individual. When you consider the fact that Warren is at loggerheads with Ben Shalom and Yarde just worked with him, maybe that has soured Frank Warren's feelings towards Anthony Yarde even more. Because again, as I said at the start of the video, Yarde has been linked over the past couple years to fights with Joshua Buatsi and Callum Smith, but he secured neither of those contests, and instead they're fighting each other for big money in Saudi Arabia in February. Well, Anthony Yarde is doing what? Has he been left out in the cold? At this stage, it's looking like the best option for Anthony Yarde is to actually move up to cruiserweight and fight Chris Smith. Now, he had expressed interest in this matchup when Smith was still champion, but since he's lost his title, will Yarde still be keen on the bout? I hope he is, because I think that's quite an intriguing fight. And it will be an in-house fight, potentially. Anthony Yarde did a one-fight deal with Ben Shalom for his last bout, but I'm sure Ben Shalom would be open to working with him again. You look at Chris Smith, where's he really going to go right now? I think an Anthony Yarde fight would probably generate more money for him than, let's say, challenging for the WBC Cruiserweight World title. And I'm sure he would feel that he's got the beating of Anthony Yarde. So, as I say, that seems to be the best option for AY, Anthony Yarde, as he often refers to himself, and maybe the best option for Chris Smith right now, other than a WBC title shot, depending on what he's looking for. Is he looking for the biggest payday right now, or is he looking for an opportunity to become a champion again as soon as possible? Also, I want to just acknowledge Ingram Jones on BWTM Sports, because I was watching one of his videos earlier on today. It was actually the post-fight video he did following the Yarde Vilkans contest. And he was basically saying that Anthony Yarde needs to leave Tunde Ajayi. And his reason for saying that is that he doesn't think Anthony Yarde has improved since the Kovalev fight. And he also doesn't think that the style that Tunde teaches is getting the most out of Anthony Yarde's attributes and abilities. And I would tend to agree with that. And don't get me wrong, Tunde's done a great job with Anthony Yarde, considering he only had, 12 amateur fights? He's developed him very well, but as Ingram Jones suggested, he's maybe taken him as far as he can. You see, Anthony Yarde, before he got into boxing, was a sprinter, apparently a very good sprinter. And I've long said that you don't train sprinters the same way that you train marathon runners. Their bodies are built different. And it's the same in boxing. Certain fighters are built for high punch output, medium power, but other fighters are built for low punch output, explosive, powerful bursts. An example being David Haye. When you take a guy who's built for short, explosive bursts and try and turn him into a work rate guy, he ends up failing on both fronts. And the training methods I've seen Tunde employ over the years with Anthony Yarde don't seem to be maximizing his explosiveness. Again, to paraphrase what Ingram Jones was saying, Anthony Yarde's only got one gear. And this is a guy who used to be a sprinter. He should have several gears. But maybe he hasn't been trained for that. Maybe he's been trained to be methodical and fight steadily in one gear. Ingram Jones suggested that Anthony Yarde should go work with Adam Booth because Booth knows how to train explosive ambush fighters. And I think I might have made that suggestion myself many, many moons ago. But even if I didn't, as I say, Ingram Jones did, and I agree with him. A lot of people don't rate Adam Booth because he hasn't had much success after the David Haye years, although he did have a couple of world champions after Haye in Ryan Burnett, remember him, and Andy Lee. He also trained Billy Joe Saunders briefly when Saunders was still middleweight champion. So Booth has plenty of experience, and as I say, his style and his boxing philosophy might be the switch up that Anthony Yarde needs, but it's also possible that Yarde is too old now to make such a fundamental change in his boxing approach. Maybe if Adam Booth had got him 3-4 years ago, there would have been enough time to make the changes, but now it might be too late. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Has Anthony Yarde been frozen out after leaving Frank Warren? He's not going to sign with Eddie Hearn because Eddie Hearn is basically Frank Warren's little lapdog now. His only option appears to be Ben Shalom, unless he wants to go back to Warren, but Warren will probably want to make him grovel and maybe even sign a horrible contract as punishment. Who knows? Anthony Yarde is 33 years of age now, and he's had a couple of punishing fights. In fact, his last fight against Vilkans was quite punishing. That fight was a lot closer than the referee had it, way closer. Yes, I said referee for those of you who are not familiar with the scoring system in the UK. For certain fights, there are no judges. The referee actually scores it. And that was the case for Yarde's fight against Vilkans. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is Yarde might be very close to the end indeed. Closer than he wants to admit, and maybe even closer than Tunde Ajayi would have him believe. Because Tunde is coming out with all this stuff about Anthony's got loads of different options, the world's his oyster, yada, yada, yada. He loves being the salesman, Tunde Ajayi. And it's as if he's still trying to sell Anthony Yarde a dream. And again, don't get me wrong, for a guy who had such little amateur experience, he's done very well financially. And you have to credit Tunde Ajayi for that. But at this stage of his career, things seem to be going wrong on the business end. And I don't know whether Tunde's giving him the right advice in that regard. Obviously, I'm not privy to any of the contracts or anything like that. I'm an outsider looking in. But sometimes outsiders have a better perspective because they can see the big picture. Sometimes when you're too close to a situation, you can't see the big picture. Now, I could be wrong, of course, but I can't be the only one thinking that Anthony Yarde may have been left out in the cold here because of his decision to break away from Frank Warren. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Give me your thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out. Are you surrounded by mindless bots in human form who adhere to the norm and blindly conform? Who swallow all the mainstream BS and actually ridicule you for questioning things? Do you wish you had more free-thinking individuals in your life to network and converse with? Well, look no further. We're right here. Come and join the Brotherhood of Reason on Patreon. You'll gain access to my weekly topical content where we take deep dives on an endless variety of subjects, as well as my vast back catalogue of podcasts, videos, interviews, movie decodings, and my Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You'll also get to talk and network with myself and hundreds of other people in our members chat. You can enjoy all this via the Patreon app or on desktop and download all my podcasts in high quality MP3. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time, just like Netflix, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. Just download the app from the Play Store or the App Store, or simply visit patreon.com on a web browser. Then head on over to my page and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. All the links are in the description box below. And just a quick money-saving tip for Apple users. If you purchase your Patreon subscription on the desktop site or on Android, then you'll avoid the ridiculous 30% fee that Apple charges for purchases made on the iOS app. So if you're on iPhone or iPad, save yourself some money by buying your subscription on the actual Patreon website or on Android, because it's a lot cheaper. Once you've made that initial purchase, you can then use the Patreon app on your iPhone or iPad thereafter to access and enjoy your content as normal.